Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome to the facilities meeting. Clint Derringer will be here in about 5 minutes, but he told me to start without him. Let's just start by introducing everyone around the table.
Here Clint with Moran, Realpoint, with the Plante program. Matteson, Facilities Director.
Klepp, Trustee.
Colleen, Worden, Trustee.
Roy Bishop, Deputy Superintendent.
Tuttle, Superintendent.
Andrea, Agrusa, CFO.
Kari, Blanchett with PFM, Financial Advisor for the district.
Thank you. And we have public, I see that we have people in the audience. Is there anyone that would like to make a public comment? Go ahead. Mayor Hodges.
I thought it would be near the end of the meeting. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here as Mayor of Grosse Pointe Park and as a committed partner to achieving strong outcomes for the entire district. The question before you regarding the proposed system-wide vision that also addresses trauma is not simply a facilities one. It's a strategic one, a financial one, and ultimately a leadership one that will impact long-term sustainability for the district. With that in mind, I respectfully ask that the administration be empowered to bring forward its best recommendations without unnecessary constraint. The resolution adopted last year has been interpreted by some as eliminating certain options entirely. It can also be interpreted as allowing the autonomy to present best-case scenarios. I would urge you to embrace that interpretation. I say this because since that resolution was passed, material facts have changed. Enrollment trends, financial assumptions, strategic priorities, and community input have evolved. Good governance requires decisions grounded in the most current and complete information available. When facts change, thoughtful leaders reassess. I would also encourage the board to request that the administration and the new CFO audit the prior projections prepared by Plante Moran. A comparison of projected versus actual outcomes would provide a factual foundation for moving forward. Additionally, I recommend asking the CFO to analyze whether the proposed vision that includes Trombley can be budget neutral, and if not, to outline a clear path to achieving neutrality. It would also be prudent to evaluate whether the fiscal objectives cited in support of prior closures were realized. I'd also like to note that key elements of the vision have surfaced independently from a broad cross-section of strategic planning participants. When diverse stakeholders converge around similar priorities, that deserves serious consideration. Clear decisions require clear inputs. Leadership requires the willingness to adjust course when new information warrants it. Stakeholders, including municipalities, deserve decisions based in fact. Strong institutions are not defined by rigid adherence to past resolutions. They are defined by the courage to reassess, recalibrate, and lead. Thank you for your service, and know how committed we are to constructive and solution-oriented partnerships that benefit all. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to give a public comment? Okay, we will go right into information and discussion. Dr. Tuttle?
Yes, Kari Blanchett is here from PFM. The board has talked repeatedly about potentially looking at the option of a Series 2 bond. As you know, we're currently in a 3 series. I think she's going to present an option for a 4 series today. You have in front of you her presentation that looks like this. She's been doing this for many years, so I turn it over to her. I didn't say too many, Kari.
I just realized as I was trying to get fancy and print out some pages colored and some not, I missed a page. But the page is a simple one. So the first page is really talking about what things go into determining how much you can issue in debt and when, and how much you should issue and when. And the key thing is your needs. When do you need the money? The second thing is, can you afford it within the millage constraints? There's also things like taxable value growth rates, bond interest rates, the number of series, the timing of those series, the payback structure, the legal restrictions on structuring debt. All of that really limits what we can do within the constraints of the ballot. So what we have in front of you is just sort of a summary of where we were and where we've adjusted to and where we're proposing to go as of right now. So the pre-election numbers had us issuing 3 series. when we do pre-election numbers, they're just estimates. You know, you haven't gotten in at that point to really finalize all the numbers and the phasing on the project. So at that point, you know, we do our best estimate to determine that. So that was a 3-series issue, with the first being 45 million. After the bond election passed, as you may recall, the board wanted to downsize that first series because you didn't have a need for that money, and there was some interest cost savings that you realized because of that. Not just that you weren't carrying, or you weren't paying interest on the full 45 million, you issued only 25 million. But it also allowed us to pay more principal in the earlier years, which reduced your interest cost. So the middle column shows what was planned at that time, the 25 million, and again, that was like literally weeks after the election. It was pretty quick, because we had to move quickly so that we could put it on the December tax roll. With the second series, then being 65 million, because at that point it was just a placeholder. Okay, let's move the 20 million that was originally scheduled in 25 into the next, because we knew you'd have time to work it out on what you needed and when. And the final series was originally scheduled for 2030 with $30 million. So as you've been working on facilities and, you know, the phasing of things, I believe there's a desire to get some of those projects in place and lock in some costs that will have additional benefits that you can speak of. But so we were asked, what could the district do? Could we accelerate, you know, the future series, like the next series, into an earlier date? So we ran some numbers and determined that we could add a series this year for 30 million and still be within your millage constraint. So what we're proposing is 30 million later this year, but as soon as your taxable value comes out, we'll update the numbers again to see if we can move it up earlier. But I think, in talking to Plante, Moran, Realpoint, I think sounded like it was going to work.
Yeah, I think based off of the initial cash flow we put together, and speaking with the district, and then also with the SEAM interviews, one of the things we asked was, from a staffing standpoint, what makes sense as far as how much can we handle per year? And there's a threshold, right? If you tackle too much, you have to put on a third superintendent for major site, which obviously is the cost of the district. And then also from a standpoint of how many sites are you tackling each summer? Typically, you want to do 4 to 6 different buildings. I think more than that, superintendents will be driving all around the district trying to keep up with the subcontractors. So from our standpoint, we're targeting roughly about $20 million of park construction per year for years 2028, 29, and 2030. The first summer of construction, 2027, we're targeting roughly about 17 million, which I think was the next presentation we did with the board a few months back, outlining those projects. The last year would be remaining about 10 million, with a total of $87 million roughly in hard construction, which would work out perfectly with this plan, but from a cash flow standpoint of when it would come in the door, when we start design, and tackle the next series of projects.
So right now, talking to Plante Moran, this works within what your plans are right now. I think we were able to do a little bit more, but I think the thought process was that you needed the money sort of spread out so that you had the money available for each of those phases. So that is what the plan is, and that's what the suggestion.
Kari, when would you sell those 2026 bonds?
Right now, they're planned for later in 26.
August shows up
Yeah.
on page 4.
Yeah, but again, when we get the taxable value, all of this will be updated, and we'll continue to monitor interest rates too. So if you have a need or you want to issue them earlier, we can. There is a benefit to issuing them earlier, and there's a drawback for issuing them earlier. The benefit is you get that money in the bank, and you get to start investing it, and that investment income is money that can go to project costs. The flip side of it is you begin paying interest on your bonds earlier too. If you follow, the discussions with the Federal Reserve, the thought now is not as many rate cuts, not as quickly this year. So I don't think there's as much pressure as there was a thought that, you know, you might want to get it in earlier to lock in a higher investment rate. But, you know, so right now, that doesn't look like it's gonna be the case, but
And the Moody's,
by the crystal ball, I wouldn't be sitting here, I'd be somewhere else.
and the Moody's rating remains, or do we have to go through that?
You have to go through the rating process every time you issue debt. You actually have to go through it whenever they surveil it. And they normally surveil it every year. Now, they may not call you every year, because what they'll do is they'll look at your audit, look at things. If things are looking fine, they won't even ask for a call. But when you issue a bond, you have to go through the whole process again.
On page 4, the interest cost, the total interest cost of 86 million.
That's the estimated using those interest rates, which have a buffer over the current rates.
Right. Compared to the estimate that we were looking at back in October, November last year. The difference really would be 30 million times roughly 4.7% for the course of 12 months essentially.
Yeah.
That's
I figured, you know, anywhere, it might be more like $1 million.
Yeah.
It might possibly a little bit more than that, because remember, it allowed acceleration of principal, so that's worth more.
Yeah.
And that compounds it
Yeah.
quite a bit. So I got here and I'm like, oh, that's right, I wanted to go back and enter in the full amount into that structure, just in case someone asked me that question, I forgot to do that. Because our meeting earlier went late.
Well, so the question I have then for Ben is, if this is a favorable outcome for us to do, is this something we can handle as a district, to take this many more projects on?
Yeah, just piggybacking off of what Gary said, as long as we keep them in relatively the same locations and we're not adding another superintendent, which would be a cost to the district, I'm fine with, you know, helping oversee those projects. So,
And
But advocating for Ben, he needs support, he was telling you. You need to get somebody to help him. Bob is thinking funding bond, one person can't do all that.
And then on the news yesterday, you know, there's all the talk with everything going on in the Middle East. Is this still a favorable time to do this? Because I know when the facilities met last time, one of the reasons I think to push it was because it was a really good financial time to do this. Is it still a good?
I actually have a slide in here.
Oh, you do? Okay.
But also, before I go to that, this page here that just summarizes the projected interest cost that you just brought up on the bonds, which again has a buffer in the future series interest rates. But on the lower side is just what the thought is now by series on how those would be structured. So there's a lot of flexibility. Every time you issue a series, we can revisit this. But you can see it's stepping down in the future, because one thing we had talked to the district about before, and one thing the board had brought up in one of the earlier meetings before the election, is to try not to have that millage stay the same all over the line, because you know there'll be ongoing capital needs in the future. So allowing some room for, you know, some future capital. So that's what we're showing there, but every year as you get actual taxable value, and as you phase in the additional series of the bonds, this can be revised. And you can move more principal up, which saves interest costs for the taxpayers. The next page is what you're asking about. So we have seen the beginning of this year has been quite phenomenal on interest rates.
But I just wanted to make sure I understood what you just said. As years has progressed, I think what I heard you say is this: as we go forward in years, as taxable values increase, we can pull ahead additional principal payments, maintaining the millage rate, but paying down more principal, therefore reducing interest costs. Thanks.
And then you'll also have this debt that will become eligible for refinancing in the future, and you'll have that opportunity in the future to revisit the structure at that time and strategically place where those savings are. So you'll have flexibility, quite a bit of flexibility in the future. So where are interest rates? So with the geopolitical situation this week. We have seen, this is the interest rate movements in the municipal tax exempt high grade municipal bond market by year. So the top is year 1, bottom is year 30 for the maturities. Over the past 3 months, that's each week, so that's the change by week. So if it's green, that means the rates went down. The deeper the green, the lower the rate movement. The red means the rates have went up. And the deeper the red, the higher the rates have went up. As you can see over this last 3-month period, it's been pretty stable to improving until we got to this week. The interesting thing about it is most of the market came in on Monday, including myself, expecting that we would see a rally in the market because when you see things happening with wars and things like that, there's a major flight to quality. But I think everything that's happened with the oil and some concerns on some economic numbers, and how far the rates have moved down this year, I think the investors were looking for any reason to get some of that they've given up back. That being said, the rates are still very good. Now, they're not at those ridiculously low rates that we saw 10 years ago, or wherever it was, 8 years ago, where you could almost finance bonds for 1-2%. I've been doing this 40 years, and that was unheard of. And we stayed there for a very long time. But from an overall perspective, if we were to go back in history, we're still at really good rates. Like right now, you're still selling a third 20-year issue for under 4%. So, I wouldn't say that's bad. Now, the district, if you move forward, you have the right. And, if rates go up and you don't like where they are, so long as you have enough money to get you through your projects, we can just delay, put off the sale. So you have flexibility to, we actually had a school that we're going into the market, we were supposed to go into the market with 100 million, the Tuesday, the day of the big movement, and we said no, it's too big, unknown, people were just throwing on whatever they, could get away with on an increase. You want to wait for stability. So you're going to have the same flexibility. And they said, we don't even need this until May, June. We can sit on it. And if we need to, we can downsize it. So you'll have the same flexibility. That's when we would call and say, okay, what do you really need to get us to a time period?
So if I can just make sure that I understand the table correctly. So the full table is 3 months worth of rate changes. Lower rates are good. Higher rates are bad, that's the red-green piece. And then you've got accumulation, a total column to the right, where the bigger green numbers are. So the very first row on the 1-year maturity, right, is 48 down over 3 months. And this poor week, we gave back 12 points.
The week isn't done yet, so what I did is I just put it, our system can't produce the chart because it's not there. So what I did is I said, okay, give me a cumulative 2 days.
Sure.
And let me just put it next to there for you.
So your point about them still being really good is in the past 3 months, rates have gone down 48 points and we gave back 12 in
So
theory
it's not,
on that particular product row. So while a column of red, as there's global instability happening, is not wonderful to see, the full picture on 3 years is still very great.
Yes.
So the row that would be most applicable is the 20-year maturity row. And that's what we sold.
Well, it's actually that whole, everything up to the 20-year maturity.
Okay.
Because you're paying principal back every year. So it's an overall average. And these rates are the national AAA interest rates. We trade at a spread over that because every state, depending on what the state income tax is, what the market's, feeling about the investments in that state, what type of bond, there's an amount you spread over to that. We actually got in with a issue for Oakland University at the low point, I think it was last week, that they, without, they're a single A rated university, and they, I think, at points spread at 35 over, which is really good for a single A rated community, or university. So, so when you look at those rates, just know that's not your rate, you would be something over that. So if you were a natural AAA in California, you'd probably be closer to there. So.
In the original post-election, so going back to this view, the 65 million for 2027. I just can't recall exactly when that, was there a slated date in 2027 for that?
I think it was spring.
Yeah, I have the original, so this is the final.
Same May.
I brought them all, so.
It seems like what we're essentially doing is taking that series, pulling half of it up forward 6 months and pushing the other back 6 months. roughly speaking.
With the ability to still reevaluate in 2027.
Yeah.
All of this
Yeah.
same
Yeah,
questions.
and even at that time, we did say that, we just have dates in there based on what we discussed. And the reason we targeted, all those were targeted for a November issuance. And the reason we use that date is you're a December levy. So you must have those bonds delivered by the end of November in order to get it on the tax roll.
Yep.
So, there's no, we can move it up earlier, it all, we just have to balance it out with the draw schedule and when you're gonna need the money.
Yep.
And you don't want, typically, schools don't wanna be, issuing bonds every single year either, so,
Because that's a pain for your CFO and for everybody
We are
else.
correcting a mistake from November, it's plain and simple. We shrunk the size of the first issuance in November, now we are correcting that mistake, plain and simple, this committee. Right. I was the chair, I made the mistake, I'm owning up to it.
You didn't make a mistake. You don't know what the numbers are gonna be. Could have been good.
you made a decision based on the information that you had at that
Just-
time and what you knew on the projects that, or what you thought needed to be funded within that time period. That's fine.
I think even from a cash flow standpoint, from the product we identified, I mean, I think, the first sale is more than sufficient to get us through that first
Right.
series. So, I think it's still a very good standpoint. Like Kari's point too, we'll be sure we're in touch with PFM and give them updated cash flows based on whatever projects are decided for Series 2 and by year. Because obviously there's some projects that can be done during the school year, right? Like, Parcel School, we section that off from firewalls that can be worked on during the school year, as long as we're not disrupting students. Trombley's another one, Elworthy, tennis courts, like those are all gonna be kind of off-season projects. So from a cash flow standpoint, there will be some wiggle room.
And remember that structure allows you to repay a lot of principal up front, so it did save you money.
For sure.
So,
Anything else for Kari?
Thank you so much for giving us that information.
I did send this in PDF to Andrea, so she can share it with you with the slide that's missing. It's not, it doesn't have any numbers on it, it just has, a circle with, some circles of, thoughts on what you consider when you.
So Kari, can you just,
stage.
before you leave, tell the board the decisions that need to be made? A, if they're going to do it. If they're going to do a
So,
series
yes.
2. B, when.
So if you are going to proceed or want to proceed with an issue this year, the school board is going to have to adopt a bond authorizing resolution, and we're gonna have to go through the issuance process. It all depends on if you want the flexibility to be able to do it earlier. We will monitor it. Once you get your taxable value, we will go in and update all these numbers.
Are you able to give 2 scenarios as far as timeframes when we would need the issuance approval and so forth that I can share with the board? Just so we know
Yeah,
a
so I
timeline?
can, let me actually give you a timeline
Good,
on it.
And I can send that
Because
to them.
for an August election, issuance date, that means if we were gonna receive the bond proceeds in August, we really would normally be selling in July, which means you really need to start that process.
Does that mean like we gotta back it up?
Yeah. Optimally, the
What's the
resolution
latest we
should
could
be,
sell them, just out of curiosity?
you need to sell them.
I mean, the last time
You
we
need to
didn't
sell
sell
them by the end of November.
Right, like we did last time.
Yeah. Before December one, so. But I would say optimally, the board adopting the resolution in May would be good. And again, that doesn't commit the board to doing it for sure, it just gives you the flexibility to do it, so.
Other questions? Is you comfortable with that? When I get the timeline, I'll send that out. Give that for January, so.
I made a note, just in terms of agenda and tracking possible board action, approximately May for August proceeds, but
Yep.
that's not a hard and fast rule. The hard fast rule is, like you said, November, because we're a December letter, right? That's the, we don't want to get anywhere near the hard wall, if
So
possible.
do you want like two timelines, one for the later time?
I think I can figure out the later
Yeah.
time, I can just
So you
adjust
just
it.
see
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I just need to know the.
Did you mean July selling as in marketing the bonds and then the actual August
Proceeds.
proceed of that?
I'm gonna go.
Okay, Gary. Thanks, Gary.
I think you are.
Next, the architectural services, obviously we're a little out of order. Took that to the board prior to coming to facilities so that hopefully we can approve that at the next meeting. Are there any questions about that? Okay. Everybody's did a pretty nice job. So if we can cruise through that one, then we'll go to the, because I think the construction management service, you're out to another you. Thanks, Gary.
So yeah, this is the second part in our three-part series. I think we met with facilities back in November of last year. We had discussed issuing an architectural RFP in January, first manager in February, and then we did the technology consultant in March. Storage management services, so we issued the RFP back in early February. Received bids 2 weeks later on the 23rd. We received bids on Friday the 20th. We held posted interviews on the 25th, and in that committee was administration, Dr. Tuttle, Dr. Bishop, Ben, Agrusa, and a few others. And we interviewed the top 3 firms, and how we got there was we put together a criteria-based selection, everything from firm experience working on historical buildings, from capabilities, staff experience, proposed fees, and that narrowed down our list to the 3 top firms to interview. Based on that process, we felt that Clark probably gave us the best and strongest proposal. They're probably the biggest, one of the biggest, at least in Michigan. They have a lot of K-12 experience. The proposed team they had on there, as you can see in the third page, really the biggest difference in cost was the staffing, right? And other firms, there's different ways you can approach it. Clark approached it as they're going to have full-time staff dedicated to Grosse Pointe, so we don't risk losing other firms which we would put on staff for the summers, pull them off and make a different staff the next summer, which disrupts a little bit of the cohesion and the turnaround, I guess, for the district. Overall, I mean, Ben, you can speak to it. Clark came pretty aggressively as far as capabilities and their staffing plan. They even went as far as taking the bond sale amounts and then placing them at buildings, giving us a map as far as here's the buildings we would tackle each summer. Obviously, the district has some discretion, but overall, they have a really strong proposal. Their fee was right in line with kind of what we expected. We did meet with them after their interview and discuss their staffing and kind of evaluate a little bit differently, which resulted in them reducing their fee by about $200,000, which was great news. It came in at a total of 10.04%. So we were budgeting 10%, so we're right in line with where we expected them. And again, I think the biggest difference between them and the other firms was they're kind of giving Grosse Pointe the white glove service, right? They're making sure that everybody's in these buildings. These aren't new buildings that are kind of cookie cutter, so to speak. They're historic buildings that you could have unforeseen issues pop up throughout the summer. So they have a pretty good staffing plan to tackle that. Overall, they had 47,000 hours allocated towards this project, which is a good, Dr. Tuttle's point earlier, there's going to be a lot going on between the bond and the sinking fund, and the more eyes we have on these projects, the better. But that's kind of my takeaways from this proposal. We are recommending Clark for a total amount of $6,731,567. This is just for their CM fee, which includes their hours, their staffing, some of the general conditions. In addition to this, they will get a 2.25% on the hard cost of construction, which would be awarded each summer. So when we go out to bid for Series 1 projects, we would come in front of the board, bring all the subcontractor recommendations along with Clark's 2.25 GMP, which is guaranteed maximum price, and that would be approved by the board at a later date. That 2.25% would be applied to whatever projects we're tackling each year. So we would come on a yearly basis.
I had one, might have layers to this one, Kari. So, two bidders, really close score. So my eyes were drawn to those two particular proposals. I see a big difference in ability to meet contract terms, and that difference could have been eaten up in potentially the interview scoring line item. So it would be, I would like to know more about the low score for the ability to meet contract terms and the difference in interview between the two firms that were closest together here.
So Frank Rewald and Sons and Rockford, are those two?
Yeah, Frank Rewald and Sons, yep, and Clark are the two that I'm comparing.
Rewald and Clark. Okay, so yeah, so we actually did bring that up in the posted interviews. Clark had a good number of exceptions, which lowered their score on the criteria-based selection. However, after meeting with them and reviewing all their exceptions, it's a lot of the same stuff we've seen in other districts, nothing that's a showstopper. And we actually met with the district's legal counsel since then and went over the exceptions and pretty much came to agreement with most of them. We're kind of on the way to make them work. So Clark did have exceptions, but it wasn't anything major. It was more along the lines of things like general conditions or construction contingency and kind of when that turn back is. So, do they return 50% of construction contingency halfway through the project, or do they hold on more of it until like the third quarter of the project, so to speak, and then return it? Obviously, whatever's unused would be returned regardless, but things like that. Frank Rewald didn't have any exceptions. To your point, they just accepted the contract as is. And I think that the big two difference between the firms is really their hours allocated towards the project. Frank Rewald came at more of an approach of here's your team for the summer, if I'm sober we take them, use them elsewhere. Whereas Clark had their staff, their superintendents really engaged throughout the entire bond program, just to ensure consistency with the district.
And that difference, it shows up in the hours column, obviously, but that is what's reflected essentially in the interview score as well?
Correct. Yeah, the interview score, we really looked at their approach, their history of working with similar buildings, historical buildings, overall firm experience. So, I mean, and Dr. Tuttle and Dr.
They're
Blanchett were
far
there.
superior.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And it was a unanimous decision. You get what you pay for. They had 3 superintendents on it. Do they still, or do they take that off to get down to the 200,000?
We reduced the third superintendent for the final year, as well as a couple months of second superintendent towards the tail end. And we
They
wrapped
just
up
understand.
that
Yeah,
point.
I mean, Clark, A, they've done the most. B, they know the caliber that Grosse Point's going to expect. And they're well aware. And that's why they put the extra hours in, and that's why you see extra money. But you need it. Fun's gonna need it. And
Correct.
they have the experience and they have the expertise. And they're just a wonderful company.
And I think 4 out of the team members that they proposed actually are just coming off of the Oakland Hills clubhouse project. So they kind of understand the high caliber clients with a lot of eyes on it. Obviously that project has a ton of eyes on it, as will this, and I think that they'll deliver.
And the other thing I will tell you is their 3 superintendents lived in St. Clair Shores. They're all around here, which is huge because when something breaks on a Saturday and Ben wants somebody up here, he doesn't want to come from across the state. He wants them right next door. And they did that intentionally. They chose superintendents who had the experience and proximity to the district, which I was really impressed that they considered that as well.
Yeah, and Clark has worked on bonds over $300 million in value, where Rockford, the largest bond they've worked on, is $70 million. So,
The scope
Fully-
of their bond, the number of their bonds,
Right.
and they just worked hard.
fully comfortable
Paul,
with
nice to meet
Clark.
you.
Sorry.
And none of those
Glad to hear
exceptions that they've mentioned, none of those concern you that they can't meet any of those? Like, what would be an example?
Yes. Yeah. We actually met earlier this week, I don't know if you already mentioned it, with your attorney and went through them all. There's a litany of them. I mean, sometimes they don't like the word defend and the indemnification. One we talked about quite a bit with them is bonding requirements. So like if there's a subcontractor that we haven't worked with before, would we require them to be bonded or not? There's usually some issues around with a CMC around insurance requirements and things like that. But it's all things we've worked with before. We probably have, Clark's probably on 6 or 7 different bond projects with us. And then probably a handful of non-bond projects to municipal clients and corporate clients. So we've never had a big issue with them getting the terms.
And none of our attorneys our attorney was not concerned about any of these criteria?
No, actually, Clark Hill and I just did a contract with Clark in Detroit Public Schools, so we're gonna try to lean on that one quite a
Okay.
bit, where we've already come to terms with them, so.
Okay, thank you.
Also, they worked with Collaborative, which was huge. We like that partnership, that they've had a lot, speak very highly of Collaborative.
Yeah, that's definitely a plus.
Great. Thank you for going through the extra detail.
So it kind of, just so you know, we didn't go with, we went to low bidder, which was lower than we had budgeted for architecturally. This is a little bit higher, but it nets out to be where we need to be financially. So that's why we feel really good about this recommendation.
Gary, when you say that part of the cost savings was taken out to the superintendent in the last year, what calendar year would that be?
That'd be 2031 is what we're looking at as far as our staffing, and that kind of goes back into our cash flow. Where we're targeting roughly $20 million a year for 2028, 29, and 30, and then that last year was going to be reduced to about $10 million of hard construction, so it kind of plays out evenly with our staffing plan.
Additionally, Ben, I want you to talk to, sorry, you're done with this, but about their ability to pick up some sinking fund too, which was huge.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
really wanted
and
to mention that.
well, they have, they're staffed, like, as Gary said, they're staffed through the 5 or 6 years of the bond. They're more than willing to help us out on our sinking fund projects as well. So when we're doing the bond projects at a certain school, if we're doing a sinking fund boiler replacement, they're more than willing to help us out on that and give us a good rate on that. Since they already have the superintendents on site, so that was very attractive to us as well.
And comparatively, although you're going to be down a superintendent, the other two only have one superintendent. They had 3, you're reducing 1 at the last for a couple of summers, so that's a huge differential and it's needed in this district.
It's tough for CMs to get a job when they only know what they see in the RFP, right? You get staffing heavy, you get staffing light, just the difference. The nice thing is we're setting this up as a not to exceed. So if we decide to switch gears or get done faster or whatever, any money we save comes back to the district. So that's pretty reassuring.
Well, it's clear why you guys made the choice. It's just that when we got one sheet to look at the evaluation, I wanted to make sure that I at least mentioned what jumped out to me on
For
my.
sure. Yeah, it's
appreciate it.
it's not an easy process. We had pretty good firms.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, Steve. All right, so moving on, Ben, the floor is yours.
All right.
You got a whole litany of things.
So turf is next on my list, so this is just an extension. There was part A and B to this project due to using a consortium. So part A, which has already been approved by the board, was the materials portion. As promised, this is the labor portion of that. S&H was the low bidder on this one, who's done work in the district before. They did our ball fields and they did an awesome job for us. So I'm super happy that S&H won this. There's two pieces to this. So there's the earthwork portion of this, labor and installation is what I said at the previous board meeting. But there's the earthwork piece of it, and then also the installation by Shaw, which is all covered under this. So, any questions for me on the labor piece of this project? All right.
One thing I would add is, when we bought the turf, we reserved the right to assign that contract to whoever was gonna do the installation, to make sure that there's no gaps and it's all tight as a drum. So I think we plan to probably do that still as well. So that'll have one contract for the whole thing.
I'm also using this opportunity while we have the turf up, which is including it in this, to install conduits under the turf, be just empty conduit. So if we want to run electric to one side or the other of the field, this is my one opportunity for the next 15 years to put conduits in and make sure we have opportunity for future sound improvements, electrical, whatever. So we're just putting empty conduit, there's nothing in them, but I just wanted to make sure that I had that maneuverability to do anything I wanted to do without disturbing the turf in the future. So that is included in this, but I thought it was important to do that while we had the turf up.
And the way that it's shaping up, we haven't had any major budget surprises, even with all the unknowns at the beginning.
Correct.
That's very fortunate. Nice job. Great to everybody. Thank you guys.
The next one is for the north-south fire line project. Again, we're taking the low bidder on this project, which would be CNS Electric. So virtually, what these projects boil down to is it's just an electrical contractor that's pulling wire for us, and then National Time is going to do all the terminations and the setup and the programming, which is included in this. So we decided to break this up into 2 years. I didn't want to take on north and south this summer. The main reason for that is we're going to be doing work at south in 2027 for the secure vestibule project, and I thought it was more conducive to take on do the fire alarm project and that project at the same time at south while we had ceilings down and whatnot. So, and the fire alarm main panel resides in the south office, so it just makes sense to do those 2 projects at the same time while those ceilings and walls are opened up for that project. So.
Who did you say is actually doing the terminations?
So it'd be National Time. That's a fire alarm service. It's a panel service provider. We currently have them in Kirby right now. That's the newest alarm panel in the district, and that was installed with the last bond. So I'm looking to make a district standard because right now we're having to go to eBay to get certain replacement parts. There's an old Faraday system that's littered throughout the district, and we just can't get parts for it anymore. So we're starting with the high schools and working our way down. Our schools are still safe, we're still monitored properly, but it's getting harder and harder to find replacement parts for some of these old fire alarm systems. So I'm really happy to start with the high schools, and because it's cumbersome to work on this. So
that supplier became the standard by being the most recent.
I'd rather not go into Kirby and replace that new system, so I'm using that as the standard for the district, and we haven't had any issues with that system, so I'm fine using that as a standard, just so, number one, I don't have to replace that system when we get to the elementary schools, and it's a perfectly working system. There's no reason to yank it out.
As far as fire alarm goes, National Time is the biggest and the best.
Sure. So we're overdue for this, honestly. So especially there's some schools that have 2 different fire alarm systems trying to work together and communicating with each other that are at different ages, and it's really it's awful. Just I'm being polite when I say that. So this is good, and I'm happy to get this one off my list of things to do. So But yeah, any questions on this project?
Just like when you see bids come in like this, right, and it's really to all three of you, and some of them are 2 and 3 times higher than when you bid. Like, is it they just don't have, they're working off of different information sets, or?
Yeah.
That's a good question. The market's funny. As contractors get busy, they start to really throw markup on top of markup on top of markup, right?
Yeah.
They usually want to make 15 or 20%. If you bid to them when their plate's full, they'll throw a number of 50 or 100% markup on something just to the off chance they get it. So it's probably just a good reminder that the earlier we bid stuff in the fall, the better, you know, for the following year. In this case, we're bidding it out, you know, a little bit later than we'd like, but next year we hope to be early again.
I never worked for a school district, but when I handled facilities bids in similar kind of context on scope, the ones that were way higher, they were telling you what it was worth to them to get in there, right? They're usually the ones that are competitive are the ones that are hungry for that business. The ones that are way up high, they will do it and they will do well, but there's some other pressure that they need to be taking care of something else. They just don't want to spend the time in your facility because they need to be somewhere else.
Right.
And there's some amount of money that'll make it worth it, but really they want to be somewhere else.
Was that, and you know, we did interview the second one, which was Great Lakes, and their bid basically, they were GCing the project, so they weren't the direct installer, they were putting a markup on someone else's, which is why they were hired, whereas CSNS was the direct contractor, smaller firm.
Any other questions on fire alarms?
Steps.
All right, moving on to steps. So this is a project, another project that I'm excited to do, and I'll say that on all my projects, so I apologize. It's fun for me to get things off my plate and get them moving. It's not technically off my plate, but to get them moving. So currently we have a ADA compliant wooden ramp at Monteith that we want to make a permanent ramp for that school. The next school, the rest of these schools all have deteriorating steps on them, so it'd be Parcells, Kirby, and Brownell. Each one of these schools have their own set of deteriorating steps that are no longer, we can't do repairs to them. They're becoming trip hazards. In fact, Kirby, I had my cement contractor just do what I call a 1-year repair just to get through the school year, just because they were in such poor shape. So this kind of falls outside of the scope of our indefinite scope contract that we just approved, because there's more architectural drawings, railings. It just falls outside of that general maintenance. We're coming at you specifically to fix these steps. Holcomb, who is doing the windows at Trombley right now, who is super engaged at doing work in the district. They're a local company. We've had a good relationship with Holcomb. They have their own cement contractor that they'll use on this project. But excited to partner with Holcomb on another project to fix some of these ADA compliant and safety issues on our steps in the district. So, any questions on steps? All right. Last one that I have is Pierce Playground. So this project is funded by, well, it has multiple funding sources. Me and Ms. Agrusa have talked about this one a few times, but so I'll go over the funding sources and just name them off. So the first one is the PTO. They're funding $38,000 on this one. The GPFPE is funding $10,000 on this one, and STEAM is funding $20,000 on this one. So it's a fully funded project, but since those monies are hitting the district, we either have to put it out for bid or we have to go through a consortium. I chose the consortium route just to move it along. So this project kind of falls in the same cadence as the turf. So we had to, we have the materials portion of it and the labor portion of it. the labor was, wrote this down, it was 41,000 and, or, I'm sorry, the materials was 41,000 and the labor was 27,000. So the labor is not over the minimum bid threshold, so we can just pay that outright. But I'm looking for board approval just to move forward on the project alone. It's fully funded, but I just want to run it through the proper, phases. So.
And I know I asked you this during our meeting, but I think it's worth repeating for the community as well. But this was supported by the PTO and by Sarah Dirksey, the administration at the school, right?
Yep. And this is an obstacle course that has climbing walls and it has it's really cool for the students. It's got rope swings and all kinds of stuff that they can really get some energy out of their systems in this one. So everything's included on it. It's the mulch, everything. So really it's going to be, I'm just going to be managing it from afar, and it's pretty much going to run itself. So that's another good thing. So.
Okay. And the other question I think I asked you is, I think that there's always been talk when we moved the fifth grade to middle school, that there would be something that was done. And I know there was talk of playground and equipment. This is what they chose for their project.
Yep.
And it sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's becoming a thing. We've got playground equipment over at Parcells, some swings over there, and now Pierce is putting equipment over there, and I'm assuming Brownell is not too far along. So
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much. It looks really, really cool.
Yeah, so that's all I've got.
Thank you.
So Great Lakes is handling the installation. Are
Yep.
they going to involve parents at all, or they just block it off, get out of our way, and we'll take care of it?
Yep, block it off. We're going to handle it. So that's all I got.
Okay, so next up is, you answered all of our questions, all of you, the table, so thank you. Now we have Q&A and open discussion. Is there anything anyone wants to talk about? I know there's a 6:30 meeting, so I think there's a few members that need to get to that. Are there any other action items or follow-up that we need to talk about?
When what would be the next, this resolution, when do you think we'll hit the agenda for a board meeting, a resolution to advance or do a second series this year?
It sounded like probably May timeframe, depending.
But if we needed 2 reads, should we do it in April and May, or do we do it in May and the second meeting in May?
Yeah, when trying to estimate the action, we're going from the vote to approve. So the 2 reads, like I try to, when I say a month, it would be first read at the first meeting and vote at the second meeting, just as a ballpark when I say it. So April or May, we would be discussing it again with the specifics, but we gotta get the PFM specifics from Dr. Tuttle, and then and then we'll get it to the agenda as soon as we all feel comfortable that we've got the right plan and that we're in support.
Okay, are there any other comments? Does anyone want to make any more comments?
Thank you guys every time that we've met, as always, Ben,
Thanks for the information.
Kari, thank you guys very much for working very hard. And Agrusa, thank you very much for working hard. I know you sit silently and sometimes go by the wayside. You guys are a very, very good team, and I appreciate that you guys work well together. It makes things a lot easier at these events for sure.
Well, Tim Klepp, I promised an hour. And it looks like we got it. Any other comments? No? Then we will adjourn. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.